All right, Motor Learning, Chapter 10. My name's Matt Evans, and we're going to roll through organizing and scheduling practice. All right, so we're going to work on key factors when undertaking physical practice, some concepts about the nature, practice schedules, and their impact on learning, and the role of variability in motor learning. Now, I have some videos of this. Hopefully, I'll get them stuck in here where we experiment, and we're going to have a subject, experimenter, and a recorder. So the goal is to walk from one chair to the other in exactly 10 seconds. Now, only the timer can see the time, and you can ask on any trial you wish for your feedback. But remember, this is a learning class, so we want to know: are you going to learn? You will not learn as much if you ask every single time. So let's say we'll likely learn better, and it's
8:55.
you only if he asks for it. He has to ask for the time. You don't tell him unless he says it.
Oh, you come look. Oh, my bad.
Oh, that's okay. That would make me ask for it. Okay, yeah, I thought it was
Okay, he asked.
We'll just say he asked for it on the first one.
Yeah, I'll just say
Most people do on the first one.
All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
You could just turn around and go the other way, but
Yeah.
this is entertaining either way.
3, 2, 1, go.
So, if I ask for the time, is it during while I'm walking or is it after?
After.
Okay, so it's after.
You want time?
Let me check what time. I'll ask for the time.
All right.
I need to slow down. I feel like.
3, 2, 1, go.
What's the time?
I'll take that back. You have to go this way every time, because if you go that way, you can watch the clock.
Oh.
Well, you could hear it.
Yeah, what's the time?
You want time? 10:78.
Not bad.
Nah.
So apparently we need some white noise in this room for this experiment, but you're the only ones that have figured that out.
3, 2, 1, go.
See, what we wonder here is, when did that person choose to ask for feedback, and did the feedback give you what you needed? So then we will do a second one, and that person can only get feedback when the first person got it. Makes it kind of interesting. Now, what changes here is it changes the focus. So you'll remember from chapter 3 that internal focus is better than external focus. So figuring out how to motivate your learners, whether that's in a PT setting, whether that's in a physical education setting, is going to be better if you can get them to internal discussion there. All right, so ways of getting that intrinsic motivation a little better. Goal setting is a great one, and then self-regulated practice. So having them have some control. I've definitely noticed in my physical education classes when I put 4 stations out and I say, pick one, and you're going to do it for the warm-up today. I will get more effort out of them than if I say, here's 4 stations, you 5 go to that one, you 5 go there, you 5 go there, you 5 go there. I will get more energy out of them if I let them have some sort of choice. So it's just interesting, by just giving them some control over their learning environment, they will have more motivation to do what they're supposed to be doing. It's interesting. And then social comparative information. My goodness, Strava is great for this. And we have entire classes based around posting your things to Strava and seeing what the rest of the class is doing. Now, this one I thought was really fascinating. So they had this looks like it's at a shooting range in 1992. They don't say what type of shooting, so we're going to say archery because I know that's one that you can easily get a score on. So when the experimenters set the goal, you can see that it continually raised up and then dropped down in their retention when they came back later over 5 sessions. When the participants set the goal, they actually improved more, and then more specifically, the retention at the end was better. Now, and this is the one I see a lot in classes, is do your best goals. They actually kind of bounced around when they said just do your best. They didn't actually improve, and their retention was lower compared to the other two, and even their normal numbers never even got up to the retention numbers of a experimenter or participant set goals. Really interesting study there. So wherever setting you're in, personally as a physical educator, I would tell players when they're just throwing a ball back and forth, can you get 6 throws back and forth without the ball touching the ground? Can you get 20? And then sometimes I'll ask them, how many do you think you can get? And they'll be like, 50! I'm like, go for it! This was an interesting one. Depending on what kind of feedback you give. Do you give them false negative, as in giving them negative feedback against what they would normally do, or telling them that they're doing a great job even though they're not actually doing a great job? So telling them that they're doing it wrong even though they're doing it right. Or control would be, what do I have written over here? Control group got true feedback. So true feedback was higher in every single case here. False negative, a little bit lower. False positive definitely was the worst. When you're telling them that they're doing a great job when they weren't, didn't do well. So actually giving real feedback is what seems to be the norm here, is the best thing to do. Now, different people have different focuses. Most performers pay attention to the intended result rather than the movement itself. That's why it's really hard to teach someone a complex movement like shooting a basketball. You're going to get a lot of basketball things in this one, spoiler alert. I have a really hard time. People will shoot a basket and it'll go in. They'll be like, yay! And I'm like, but you're still not shooting the ball correctly and you're never going to get better. So having people aspire to pay attention to the movement itself is more important. And the more skilled they get, the better they get at doing that. So demonstrating and modeling. So your demonstrations or modeling. So you want to maximize the effectiveness of your modeling. And there's some things you can do. Who should do the model? Should you do it? Are you the best shooter in the room? Maybe, maybe not. Me, when I teach soccer, I find a good soccer coach and have them come and teach it because they know way more about it than I do. And then who should be observing? You don't necessarily want them to be peer evaluating each other when they aren't experts at it or haven't figured it out. But it also is not a bad idea to have like a varsity player. Like I'll have my varsity basketball players be the shooting coaches when I teach shooting and basketball to my physical education classes. I'll have them come in and help me teach it. So having somebody that's doing it, and that also helps the basketball players teach it to other people. So it just depends on who you want to be actually observing. And then what additional information should be provided during that process. And that's kind of what we went over there a little bit ago. Now, I think we're going to try this later. I think we might do this in a couple of days or a couple class periods. So mental practice. Sometimes it's better. And I've heard stories about a guy that was in a very small cell during World War II. And in his mind, he played a round of golf every day. Every single detail, every single step, every single shot. And he kept playing over and over in his mind his favorite golf course. So, there was 4 or 5 hours a day that he would just spend in his head practicing that round of golf. And when he got back from the containment camp that he was in, he was a better golfer afterwards because he had practiced for 4 or 5 hours a day in his head. Amazing that could happen. So anticipating the sensations and the results could be better. So we will try this whole thing here where half of you are going to mentally try it and then throw it, and the other side is just going to try 10 times. We'll come back to that another day. Hopefully we won't make as big a mess on the floor as I did last time. We'll come back to that one. So the different kinds of practices. So work and rest periods. Mass practice is a practice schedule which the amount of rest between each trials is very short. So take a swing, take 10 seconds. Take another swing. I'm thinking golf here. So the amount of rest is less for each trial. Distributed practice is where you have a longer period of rest in between trials, maybe even the next day. The time in practice is often less than the time at rest. So for a discrete task, so short, quick things, there's no evidence that reducing the rest time through mass practice degrades the learning, so it makes it worse. So having less rest time, if you're throwing darts, it's probably not going to change depending on how much you have. Now, a more continuous thing like riding a bike, the distribution of practice has a positive effect on the learning that's happening. So when they sleep on it before they try riding a bike again the next day, I've got little ones at home. Trying to teach them how to ride a bike is a goal of mine. Being a physical educator, I want my kid to ride a bike as soon as possible. We'll see if it happens. All right, schema theory. This is where we were after the end of the first day there. So this is all the new stuff. So the learner requires a set of rules called schemas. So this would be related to the different things, the distance, the speeds, the forces, as parameter values necessary to produce their actions. So this is how we create movement from experience. So this is taking a jump shot in different locations on the court. You're never going to be in exactly the same spot. Or a great one for this would be a forehand in tennis. Sometimes that forehand is going to take place in the perfect place where you had it. Now, the other time is it could be way out from you. So if that was the case, then you would need 100 different programs for 100 different variations of that forehand. Or, let's see what this tells us.
Okay, today's video is going to look at Smith's schema theory. The schema theory tries to explain how we learn and perform discrete perceptual motor skills. If you remember, discrete skills are skills that take a short time to perform and have a clear beginning and end. Hence the discrete part of that definition in the beginning. They involve using our senses to understand what is happening, hence the perceptual part of that definition, and then use our bodies to take action, hence the motor part of that definition. Schema theory was developed by Richard Smith in the 1970s. His work built on the limitations of earlier information processing models that attempted to explain how we create movement from experience. Smith argued that people don't learn specific movements and store these separately in the brain as individual motor programs, as had been theorized up until that point. Schema theory says that we create generalized motor programs for a skill. We do this through exploring the movement. Specifically, we learn the ways in which variations of the same skill are related. Even considering just one action, like a forehand or backhand drive in tennis, the ball is always unique in its height over the net, how fast it is approaching, how much spin it has, the direction of that spin, the height of the bounce, and so on. And let's not forget that these conditions change again, depending on the surface that the players are playing on. The performer will also vary their intentions of how to hit the ball back, faster or harder, or to place the shot left or right, short or long. Even when two shots look identical, they will be slightly different. As we've discussed, this stored information in the generalized motor program is changeable to respond to the situation. The larger the motor program that is achieved through practice, the easier it can be adapted to new situations. Even the best golfers in the world get themselves in tough positions. Their superior schema allow them to apply their generalized motor programs in a variety of situations like these.
Give it a go that he has a chance to play it, yes.
It will pop up out of there if you hit it right. I'd say the odds are, 1 in 5, though, that he hits it inside of 15 feet.
In schema theory, there are 3 things required to perform a skill: a generalized motor program, a recall schema, and a recognition schema. Before the generalized motor program is executed, the performer engages their recall schema before deciding on the movement response. The more experienced a performer is, the larger their recall schema, which will in turn mean better adjustments into the generalized motor program.
On the second playoff hole of the 2012 Masters, Bubba Watson's errant drive landed in the woods right of the fairway. Bubba's ball was 163 yards to the flag in a straight line. But in between the ball and the flag was a Carolina cherry tree, a magnolia tree, a TV tower, and hundreds of patrons. He was in jail. A straight shot 163 yards along that line puts him in a bush left of the green. Well, from this spot, which is where a dead straight ball would have landed, the flag is still 35 yards away.
As Bubba approached the ball, he would have assessed his options. In a sport like golf where there is no time pressure, his recall schema has a lot of time to process the information in front of him. In an invasion sport such as rugby, the athlete has far less time and the recall schema works subconsciously. The recall schema has two parts. First, it assesses the initial conditions, i.e. the situation you are in. Here, Bubba is looking at the ball, looking at where the hole is, looking if there are any obstructions in the way. The response specification interprets this information and feeds forward into the generalized motor program for an action to occur. Bubba would have assessed, what is the best play here? Aggressive or safe? Which club should I select? How hard do I need to hit the ball? What type of shot is best given the situation to help me achieve my goal? This situation would be an absolute nightmare for an amateur, but a professional golfer like Bubba Watson with a well-developed schema, he was able to pull out the shot of his lifetime, put the ball on the green, one putt, and win the Masters.
The 17th, and what a scene it is. Johnny, I have seen a number of players putt from the back part of this green, and the results have not been good. Johnny, that's better than most. How about him? That is better than most. Better than most.
Recognition schema are used to evaluate the movement from the sensory information. It is used during and after the response. Throughout a movement, the recognition schema is compared to the expected kinesthetic field from the ongoing movement to evaluate the efficiency of that response. If the response outcomes are not as desired, the schema are then modified based on the sensory feedback and knowledge of results, as is the case here with KJ Choi, who ensures on his second attempt he hits the ball further to reach the green.
So Serena Williams here stores a general motor program that she adapts to suit her needs. So the conditions are, where am I on the court? What is the response specification that I want? I want it to go over the net into this corner over here. And then other sensory feedback there. Did it look? How did it feel? And we do this in, say, the video had a bunch of golf ones there, which, if she finds herself in the same situation, though, she will use the same adaptations. So this is why professionals make mistakes still. So you can recall that schema. So you do step one, the initial response and the response selection. And then 3 and 4 take place after the movement. So recall is going to happen before And then recognition is, did it work or not? The last time I was in this situation, I did this. So here's kind of the general terminology. Whenever a movement is made, the learner records the results as well as a parameter of what is applied to the general motor program. Eventually, these relationships are generalized into a general schema. So the schema relates these perimeter values and outcome distances. So for a quarterback to throw a 25-meter throw, that would be this one here, the learner or a 45-meter, the learner relies on schema to generate those values, because they would be practicing the 20-yard. As the game goes on, they threw a 12-yarder, they threw a 18-yarder, they threw a 22-yarder, they threw a 30-yard, and they threw a 35 and a 42. They take all those things together to come up with the one that they're going to throw next. So there's some practice here. Variable practice enhances schema learning. And we talked about this the other day, and I've got all those slides here in a little bit. But the basic research paradigm consists of two learners. You have non-variable consistent practice group practicing a single member of a class of tasks. So they practice the same thing over and over. If it was golf, they practice the 10-yard swing over and over and over. And then the practicing other group is going to be practicing, they use football passing. This could mean practicing different football passing distances each time. So two groups have the same amount of practice, only to differ by the type of practice they have. So this would be the constant group, their transfer test. So when they went back, this one looks like it's a speed test here. The absolute error on the single tests, 3 tests, 13, 15s, the variable practice, the learning goes up the longer they go and the closer they become together. All right, so here's some examples here. So in the example, you can work on catch and shooting, one skill or task, and you shoot from the same spot over and over again. So consistently from the same spot. This would be consistent practice. So variable versus consistent. So variable practice is schedule of practice in which many variations of a class of actions is practiced. In this case, we're going to do a jump shot. Consistent practice is a sequence in which only a single variation, which is what we just saw. So this would be a variable practice of that same one. So this would be an example of a drill that is block and variable. So you can catch and shoot each time. You should work on the same skill or task. However, vary the location after each shot.
That would be 2 points. That would be 4 points. That would be 6 points. 6, 0 points on this. 8, 10, 12.
So they had the shot itself was the same distance, but it's from a different spot each time. So that was a variable constant practice. So the benefits of a variable is the learners acquire schemas when they practice. So the variable practice enhances their development, but it allows a little effective on the novel task that they're going to be using in the future. So in basketball, is it better to do a set shot or a jump shot? That's always been one of the questions. Your Jordans, your Kobe's, they were all better at the jump shot, and they used to have this big hang and fire. I do say that Stephen Curry has helped one thing. People are trying to shoot quicker than they used to. Jordan and Kobe did not help that. So the data we're going to show you here is from college basketball shooting set shots and jump shots from 5 different locations. All perpendicular to the basket, so straight on. including one from the foul line. So we're going to show you the jump shot accuracy decreased almost linearly the further away from the hoop they got. The contrast here is the 15-footer. So in contrast, even though the set shot performance decreased in accuracy at the 15% or the 15-foot mark was much more accurate than you would expect the performance on the other shooting locations. So they were much closer to the predicted remark on the set shot compared to a jump shot at 15 feet. It's interesting. So the findings have some interesting implications on learning. They seem to suggest that practice should be structured according to the criterions demands of the task. The free throw is one you're going to use in a game at the end to win. The skills that would be performed in that situation. If flexibility is producing variation on a class of skills, the jump shot, then the sense to continue the variable practice. So, however, if only one version of the task is performed, then constant practice from one location seems to have some merit as well in your practice. So you got to figure out which one's going to be better for your athletes, which type of practice. So variable practice considerations. So special skills require different considerations. Spacing of those practice, variable practice schedules in blocks of trials conferred small or no advantages when compared to consistent practice conditions. Though studies have shown that variable practice scheduled in random order showed rather large advantages compared to constant practice. So it depends on the skill you're working on. So here would be constant and serial practice. So in this example, we're working on multiple skills: dribble penetration, passing, and then sliding to a different spot and shooting. This is an example of serial and constant.
Game speed, ready to go, let's go. Ready right after the other. Good talk, good Zach. Tell them next pass, I'm here. Communicate with them, let them know, Grant. All right, stop.
So it's constant in the fact that you're doing the same sequence and a version of each time. So there's no real variability here. Other than the spots drifting there. I mean, I would have modified it just a smidgen, but that's just personal. So a seriable and variable practice. So on this last one, we had constant and serial, so the same action, but it was serial because it had multiple skills together. So now we're going to have serial, multiple things together, and variable on the shooting. So they were going to have those dribble penetration, passing, and sliding to a different spot. It's variable this time because the shot location is going to be different each time. Just thinking, I need to add this drill to my drills that I do with my players, working on reading the drive and sliding the correct direction. Wow, good stuff. Now, random is a random practice is a schedule in which practice trials on several different tasks are mixed, interweaving across the practice period. So there's a lot of interference there in contextual in your brain and things. Some of them call this interleaved practice. So a practice should have various discrete or serial skills that are required for the performance. And in most sports, you're going to have to do that in random order. So where the learner does not practice the same task on 2 consecutive attempts. So by adding defense in this one, now they have a more random practice because they are going to have to read the defense and then they have to dribble penetrate and then react accordingly and find the open man on this 3-on-2 drill.
Shot, Diane, good shot. Rip hard, rip hard. Xavier, shoot open shot.
Little longer video here, but kind of getting the point there. Now, block practice is where you schedule things, a single task, and it's practiced consecutively. And there's not a lot of contextual interference, where a random practice earlier had a lot of contextual interference on their jump shot. So some side called drilled or repetitive practice. So the total time that it takes to acquire the skill when it's at random at start is going to be a lot higher. But if it's blocked, it goes a lot slower. Or it will go a lot quicker. The difference is going to be how your retention is. So 10 minutes later, if it was block, where did they end up? And the highest one was actually blocked and then to random trials at the end. It was much higher. This one went down block to block. It actually stayed fairly low, and this is that time to get it. So the time to get to adjust from blocked to random goes up 10 minutes and 10 days later. It takes them 2 seconds to get it instead of they were pretty close to 1.2 here. So it almost doubled the amount of time it took them to get the skill. However, all the random ones, when they went random to random, stayed here. And then random to block. So after they did random 6 times, notice it went down 10 minutes later and almost stayed, all of them were lower than the end of their random when it came to totally random and then even to block for their retention skills. And even random to random stayed fairly close. It was when you go block, now random, this is much worse. They doubled their time to learn something there. So that's something to think about. So an elaboration hypothesis. So frequently switching among tasks renders the tasks more distinct from each other and more meaningful. So the results are stronger memory representations, better schema to grab from. So one of the explanations of this could be the countertextual interference effect. So forgetting the hypothesis, so the frequent task switching and random thing causes people to forget the planning done on the previous trial. So this would lead to a more next trial planning. So this would be a stronger memory retention, and they call this the contextual interference effect. So you kind of need to make sure you know this elaboration. So that's when you switch, it's going to make it better. Forgetting hypothesis is when you switch, it's going to make it worse, but it's going to make you look ahead. So there are some limitations to random practice. The benefits of random action are not universal across every single skill in every single game. So random practice is likely to be the least effective when the task demands are very high. If you immediately go into a 3-on-2 drill without practicing your jump shot first in a block practice setting, you're probably not going to do as well when you get to the random stuff. Or if you go from random to block, it's not going to be as meaningful at that point. So demands originate from the task, or it will depend on the learner as well. So there are some alternatives to block and random practice. You can do a hybrid of both. Some researchers have found that there are moderate levels of random practice are beneficial for performance and learning. And some other contingencies there, the difficulty of the task and the decision to repeat the same task and switch on and off depends on the success of each individual. All right, so we are going to have a couple of things here that we're going to do in a couple of days. And I think there's going to be a YouTube later. And I think I will make this YouTube video for you another time as a separate video for a different day.
Today.
All right, so we did I'm just going to briefly skim over these. So we did say if you had 100 minutes, is it better to do it 100 minutes straight or 20 minutes 5 times per week? distributing or more. They call it mass practice. Say we kind of went over these here a while ago. Here's what that would look like if you had mass versus distributed. The blue would be mass, all 15 practices right in a row, or spreading that out to 3 days a week for 5 weeks. Though the best thing would probably have it 5 days a week, 5 times in a row. And here's what here. So just for your scheduling thing here, a block practice would be 10 pass, 10 set, 10 spikes. Random practice would be 30 of them, never repeat the same one, and so it's going to be different every single time. And we talked about how having a blocked trial versus a random trial where they had to tap the correct light bulb or something along those lines. And the retention. This is that same data we had earlier where the random practice went down. The acquisition time was shorter, but then when they came back 10 minutes later and 10 days later, they were in better shape and closer to their original one. But when they go block to random, the acquisition time went up tremendously. And the same concept here. Random practice seems to be far better than block practice in this case. And this was with the, knocked out of there, with this machine that they were doing there. And again, you could have a block practice is where you're going to the same spot every time. Randoms where you're going to different ones. And you'd think of that in math as well. Random practice having different ones rather than block practice, the same one over and over and over again. And a little bit more of that reconstruction hypothesis would be random practice has better learning normally. Is there reconstructing each trial is bad for performance but good for learning. And block practice is good for performance but not as good for learning. And say we're in a motor learning class, so we're hoping that our athletes will learn better.